Chapter 53. 8-year-old Janet walked along the street going to school. It was a winter morning, the middle of the school year, and she was looking forward to class today because it was going to be her first chance to play an instrument in her music class. That is, if the teacher was able to make arrangements with some rich guy to buy the instruments for the kids in her class. She walked briskly, not only because she wanted to get to school quickly, but also because this wasn't the best of neighborhoods. 40 years ago, her mother walked these same streets going to school. Back then, the street cleaners would come by and sweep the trash out of the gutters. That practice had gone by the wayside about 10 years ago, so a lot of trash now just piled up. The concrete sidewalks were cracked in a lot of places, and most of the businesses in this area of the city were all boarded up. One business still making it in these times was the liquor store. The owner, Mr. Wong, would always look for Janet to walk by. It's not like they ever talked to each other, but through the dirty window, half covered with lottery advertisements, he would notice her walking past each day and secretly hoped she would be safe on her journey. Out in front of the store, several men who were out of work gathered for most of the day around a metal barrel that had a fire burning inside for warmth. They would spend their time talking about everything and nothing at all. Janet looked both ways before she crossed the street in front of Mr. Wong's. She held her pink tufted vinyl coat together in the front because the zipper hadn't worked since the jacket, which belonged to her sister last year, was handed down to her this year. The men in front of Mr. Wong's looked out for little Janet, too. They didn't really know her, but Lord help anybody who might mess with her. Across the street, and catty-corner to Mr. Wong's liquor store, was another storefront that had closed long ago. Next to the closed liquor store, on the right, were 2 nondescript storefronts, and to the left were 3 more. Above the boarded-up windows of the old liquor store hung a bleached-out sign for a beer company which had gone out of business years ago. Over the other storefronts to the left and to the right were light boxes that had long ago lost their plastic sign fronts. This building was actually quite a large eyesore, and seemed to be one that should be torn down. It seemed obvious nobody cared about it at all. It seemed that way. Behind the building ran an alley, with a large roll-up door to the back of the building. A 20-year-old car with different colored fenders and dark tinting drove up the alley slowly. As it approached, the roll-up door quickly rose, and the multicolored car ducked inside a darkened cavern. Just as quickly, the roll-up door closed behind the car, allowing it to park next to several other similar cars. Once the rough-running engine was shut off, the door opened and out stepped a gentleman dressed in an expensive cashmere suit. Shutting the creaking and rusted door to his car, Mr. Armand walked toward a wall where a dusty and long unused door to an elevator was situated. Pressing the black mushroom head-style button next to the elevator door seemed futile, since it appeared this elevator hadn't run for decades. However, this button was only there for show. Mr. Armand waved his left wrist over the worn description panel located just above the button. A transponder inserted just below the skin in his wrist communicated with the sophisticated passive induction circuitry in the panel, and the command was sent to the elevator to come to life. As the elevator doors opened, the perfect red velvet and walnut paneling inside were completely out of place, with the dingy disguises all around. On the back wall of the elevator was a handcrafted, tufted bench, where one sat while waiting for the elevator to complete its journey. One would be forgiven for thinking this elevator would rise to floors above, since the half-moon dial with pointer above the dingy door showed the elevator was supposedly at the lowest floor, ground level. But that was only another part of the subterfuge. Once Mr. Armand entered and took a seat, the elevator doors closed, allowing him to inspect his appearance in the mirrored inside doors. The elevator car then lurched downward and continued its journey for 40 seconds until it came to a halt, and the doors opened into a large room. The room was filled with comfortable conversation nooks, with tables, overstuffed chairs, floor lamps, and crystal chandeliers. On 2 walls, there were what looked like well-lit windows, part of the well-played deception of this impeccably well-appointed underground lounge. As he entered, a man dressed as a butler approached. "May I take your coat, sir?" offered the butler. "No, thank you, Ellery," was the reply. "In that case, may I offer you a drink?" asked the butler. "Now that sounds like a good idea. Make it my usual," replied Mr. Armand. "Very good, sir." Ellery left to arrange for the drink, and Mr. Armand strolled over to the fireplace and took a seat. Reaching over to the business journal waiting for him, he checked a few numbers there, including the current trading price of 7 companies in which he owned a majority of the stock. By the time he had been gazing at the numbers for a few minutes, Ellery returned with a tumbler filled with ice and a generous portion of 35-year-old Japanese single-malt whiskey. Armand had calculated one time that each swallow cost a little over $580. As he savored the ripe fruit and grain subtleties sitting behind strong Japanese Mizunara oak notes, he thought to himself that $580 per swallow never tasted better. Far quicker than he would have preferred, the lounge started to fill with others who were similarly appointed. All were comfortable and well taken care of. Conversations floated around the room, centering around topics that would only interest titans of government and industry such as themselves. There were only 5 additional arrivals, and, like Mr. Armand, they all had their particular vices, ranging from expensive alcohol to the finest of cigars. All too soon, a light ringing of a bell signaled that the meeting was now to begin. Knowing the predictable timing, Ellery had already been waiting near the double doors across the room from the elevator. Hearing the bell, Ellery turned and reached for the handles to the doors, allowing the men to enter a meeting room, with a circular table in the center. In the center of the table was a 3-inch high, 24-inch wide bowl containing stones on fire. The flames lazily rose from the stones, marginally adding to the light of the room. On the walls were crystal sconces centered in the middle of the red and gold tabards hanging from the ceiling. The design of an eagle with angular edges was embroidered into each tabard. Its wings were outstretched to either side, and its single eye seemed to look straight through you. Below the monochrome black body of the eagle were its talons, holding on to what appeared to be a wreath. Inside the wreath was a cross made of 4 equal triangular shapes. The number 1939 was in the lower triangular shape. Each man proceeded to a seat, and once the last man entered, Ellery exited the room, closing the airtight door behind him. The discussions of the room were not for his ears. The 6 men stood in front of their chairs and simultaneously recited the pledge of the group. "I swear by oath that I will ever be loyal to the enlightened, and will serve as a brave and obedient soldier, and risk my life for this oath at any time. I give my will, my heart, and my soul to the enlightened ones. They are my guide for all I do. If the enlightened say I live, then I live. If the enlightened say I die, then I die. We are the enlightened ones. We are the illuminated." They all took their seats, conscious of the one chair that would not be filled today. One of the members began to speak. "Welcome, my brothers, to the monthly meeting of this most sacred bastion of civilization. May we all guide the world around us for the betterment of mankind, and may we all have the bravery to make hard choices for the good of our organization." All spoke up and replied in unison, "Amen." Brothers, today we have much to discuss. As you all know, Brother Quinn O'Cassidy was killed after successfully carrying out Phase 1 of Project Watermark in Houston, Texas. But before he could carry out Phase 2 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Our program of destabilization, leading to a profitable domestic war on terrorism, has been stalled by this development. Today, we not only have the task of finding a replacement for our brother killed in the line of duty, but we also have to decide how to get the project back on track. I now open the discussion to the group and call for comments. "I have information on these developments," said someone to the left of Mr. Armand. "And should we decide to act on this information, it may turn out to be extremely advantageous to us. The aforementioned project may be delayed if we choose to pursue this avenue of interest, but in the end, it will increase the efficiency of our operation 100-fold. The apparent chairman of the group said, "Please elaborate, Mr. Smith." Mr. Smith sat forward. "I have some sources in the military who have brought to light a device recently developed by a couple of physicists in California that is truly groundbreaking. It actually has the ability to act like transporters in science fiction." "What, like beam me up?" quipped another with a definitive chortle. Mr. Smith looked over it with an icy stare and simply replied, "Yes, Mr. Jones." With an abrupt end to the laughter from Mr. Jones, the coordinator intentionally interrupted the stare-down between the two members by asking, "And it actually works?" Mr. Smith slowly tore his gaze away from Mr. Jones and replied, 2 days ago, they not only successfully transported a man through it, but they also demonstrated it can view scenes from any place on the planet and can do so at any point in time. They actually sent a man back in time 700 years ago." "Are you telling me they invented a time machine?" asked an incredulous but much more somber Mr. Jones. "Yes," answered Mr. Smith dispassionately. For a grand total of 20 seconds, the room was quiet. An eon for a room filled with such industrial magnates. Other men would be thinking of how this invention could work for the betterment of mankind. But this was not the case for these sociopaths. No, these men were all independently thinking of how this new development could be used to dominate the world more and more, allowing their respective powers to grow even greater. World domination. That was the goal of the founding member of this modern twist to the ancient society from which this group sourced its name. The illuminated of the ancients started with the laudable goal of enhancing the experience of being human. But as with many things in this world, the organization that was once pure in its intentions became a group of only 7 men acting as puppeteers, pulling the strings of the political, military, and industrial worlds to ever increase their own power. "What are your stated goals, Mr. Smith? Do you have a business plan for this project?" asked the chairman. "At this time, I believe our goal," he answered strategically, adding in the word "our" to his reply, "should be to appropriate the technology so we can use it to our omnipotent advantage. The technology is currently under the control of an Admiral Brinstock who, through his recent actions, has shown himself to be a potential candidate material this body might consider as a replacement to Mr. O'Cassidy. I propose we make contact with Admiral Brinstock in the standard manner and see if he will play ball. If so, we will have an important ally. If not, we will dispose of him in the normal manner and find another avenue. Either way, This machine must come under our control sooner than later. Give me a cost-benefit analysis for this, Mr. Smith, asked Mr. Armand. The cost would be the number of men needed to secure the device. At this time, I forecast it would take a workforce of 300 mercenary personnel. Based on recent operations, I only see a reduction of about 30% stemming from the incursion into the facility. 30%? Do you realize how much it costs to train each of these assets? Objected Mr. Armand. Of course I do, Mr. Armand. However, consider the benefits portion of this proposal. Imagine using the device to transfer a bomb to a location only seconds before the explosion. The introduction of a sense of unpredictability can be quite useful to bend others to our way of thinking. Also consider that we don't actually need to transport anything, Mr. Smith added. We could just use the device to perform recon on any person at any time. This would allow us to be truly omnipotent in an unprecedented manner. The nodding heads of each member present indicated the point had been made. Seemingly to make amends for his earlier outburst, Mr. Jones then said, I move we authorize Mr. Smith to contact Admiral Brinstock to see if he will play ball. Another attendee spoke up. I second. The chairman said, All in favor, say aye. All did. With no dissenting votes, the chairman continued, the motion has been carried. Mr. Smith, you are authorized to contact Admiral Brinstock for purposes of recruitment. As far as his membership on this board, we will evaluate his viability after contact has been made. Now, on to other business. We have a report on the progress of the project in the Ukraine. Hey, fellow Galimarians, this is Dan Adrian, and I just wanted to say thank you for listening to my book. If you can, please click like down below because it really helps me bring these videos to you and lets me know what you like. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe and click on the bell so that you'll get notified when I release more chapters. If you have any questions about this or any other of my books, or if you want to know more about what it takes to write a novel like this one, please make sure you leave your question in the comments below. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.